button in that case.
Thank you, Lisa.
So we are recording now, everybody. We'll give everybody a little time to join. Okay. Let's see here. I know a couple people told me they'd be joining late. Okay. Well, maybe we will just go ahead and get started. Hi, everybody. It's good to see you all. So we may have what could be a light agenda for today, but really we'll do our normal group updates and then the real focus is the draft resolution that was sent out and that we've talked about previously, but want to get people's input on that. And then I do have a few other sort of last minute sort of check-ins with the group that we can do if we have time. All right, so that being said, does anyone have updates they would like to share? Okay. Not seeing any. Okay. All right, well, let me pull up draft resolution here. Oh, weird. Damon, you may have to pull it up. Zoom is doing something pretty funny with the shared piece right now.
I didn't have it loaded, so I've got to wait for it to open up in Word. Oh, here we go.
Oh, great. Thank you. Okay, so a little context on this. So this is something that we've brought up and discussed at a couple of our EC meetings, Sustainability Action Plan Executive Committee meetings, and also something that we've discussed at the ESC meetings as well, Environmental Stewardship Committee meetings. And we've partnered with the Faculty Council on Campus Planning and Stewardship on this. And thanks to Jan Whittington and Jeremy Hess, they've been helping to make some edits and add some good content. But the idea really here is that we want to, UW doesn't right now have a commitment to carbon neutrality. And I think everybody was in agreement that we need one. We should have one at this juncture. And the sort of another piece of that was to really try to put some focus towards decarbonizing our campuses and getting off of fossil fuels for our heating and hot water and HVAC infrastructure. So I think we did go through the whereas statements before. I don't think the whereas statements in a nutshell making a case for why we should do this, why this is important for the university. I don't think there was too much comment on this last time, but I did want to check in with folks. Hopefully everybody had a chance to look at it and see if there's anything else that you think should be in here in terms of setting the stage and making the case for why the university should have this decarbonization commitment. Ben.
Yeah, I wondered if there was discussion about in the whereas statements making a nod to the Board of Regents decision last September to also through its portfolio of investments divest from fossil fuel. It seems like it's another important data point in this list of whereases.
Yeah, that's great. We can add that. I would agree. I think that's already that would be a great
Happy to
great
work
piece
with
to
you
add.
on the language if we can do it offline.
Yep. Okay. All right. Making note of that. Okay. Thanks, Ben. Any other comments on the whereases or things that you think we should add?
Lisa, I just wanted to say hi. Sorry for the late arrival, everybody. I'm really glad to see you're having a look at the language for this legislation. And let me just give you a quick update on schedules. So we have already come up against the deadline for being able to go through the voting process in the faculty council and then have the faculty senate take this up this year. So what we're going to do is go through and do a vote in the faculty council on campus planning and stewardship on this year. And then we will tee it up for the first faculty senate executive committee meeting that happens in the fall. So it'll be presented to the faculty senate in October.
Oh, okay.
So what I'm trying to say is don't delay, please continue because we actually need to bring this before our faculty council on campus planning and stewardship at our next and last meeting of the year.
Okay. Thanks for letting us know, Jan. I think my only question would be then if it's getting sort of formally presented in October, you said, we will have, or were you going to say something, Jan?
Yeah, I mean, so the first formal presentation of it is to the faculty council on campus planning and stewardship, and whatever they vote on and vote to approve will then be elevated to faculty senate. So there will not be opportunity to edit after
I see. Okay.
After the faculty council votes.
I see. Okay. I got it. I was going to say, if that's the case, and if there was still, if there was chance to edit it in the fall, we will have our greenhouse gas emissions inventory done and everything could change potentially, but okay. Got it.
I recommend continuing to keep them separate because I think you're going to want this decarbonization legislation in place before you try to take up the tougher problem of third.
Okay.
Of the third scope 3 emissions.
And
I don't see any of this as problematic. I actually think it's a really good thing that we're doing this much coordination with all of you, because this level of coordination is somewhat unusual, and I think it's called for this legislation that is this sweeping.
Oh, great. Okay, good. That's good to hear. Yeah, and I think the widespread collaboration has resulted in some really good content. So you'll notice that there's UW Medicine is in here, explicitly mentioned. Elizabeth, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I just, actually, it's a good segue because UW Medicine is mentioned in there, and I was just looking at it, trying to understand to make sure that I see, is the commitment from the UWMC campuses just to transition off of fossil fuels, or also to reduce scope 1 and 2 emissions, as in the previous be it resolved, the UW commits to reducing its scope 1 and 2 green, because that one doesn't specifically highlight that UWMC would be included. So I just wanted to get some clarification there if that was intentional or if we wanted to add more of a commitment within the UWMC component of things.
We
just
have
wanted-
been, Elizabeth, we've been referring to University of Washington as inclusive of UW medicine. So if you feel that it's somehow necessary to list them separately, I mean, the faculty senate is for all of UW, including UW medicine. So that was our perspective on the choice of language. We are not leaving UW medicine.
That sounds fine. I just see that it is specifically mentioned in that. Sorry, I can't say the bottom of page 2, basically, where it's talking about Tacoma and Bothell campuses as well as UWMC campuses, that facilities shall create specific decarbonization plans in order to transition off fossil fuels. So it's only really mentioned, as far as I could tell, there. So I just wanted to make sure that the expectation is that scope 1 and 2 emissions in total will be addressed. I mean, I guess it is up in the higher part there. So anyway, we just want to make sure that it's complete and that we're not limiting the commitments from the UWMC part. Okay, great. Thank you.
And-
Sorry, I'm not very
Dr.
experienced
Hansen,
at reading this kind of language.
Yeah, Dr. Hansen, this is Louise. So I don't see UWMC, I just see UW Medicine. Are you seeing only one of the hospitals, UW Medical Center? I just see UW Medicine.
I see UW and UW Medicine in the middle of page 2, and then at the bottom where it's talking about transitioning off of fossil fuels, there is a line there. Am I looking at a different version maybe? Sorry, I
Damon,
have
can
it
you
open on my-
scroll down? Can you scroll down to the be it resolved?
The
that's
bottom
where-
of page 2. Yeah.
Oh,
So it's just,
interesting.
that's
Yeah,
the
no,
only thing
that's
I wasn't
weird.
sure about. So anyway,
No, I'm glad you raised that because it shouldn't just call out UWMC.
okay.
I mean, UW Medicine, is part of the UW, so.
Yeah, I
no,
think
Okay.
sure.
I think the goal there was to identify the other campuses. Because the UWMC hospital part is connected to the steam system. So it is part of the scope 1, scope 2 emissions of the main campus. I think the intent of that line was to make sure that the other campuses don't get missed out.
Okay.
Great. Thank you.
Yep, good. Thanks for the question, Elizabeth. Louise, does the UWMC campuses language that we've got highlighted there work in terms of being inclusive?
So maybe David, so when you say campuses, do you mean like the Northwest campus as well? Okay. And is that because they're university owned versus Harborview or any of the other components, School of Medicine, that kind of thing?
Well, definitely for the Northwest campus, I think Harborview is a good question from the standpoint of, from an ownership standpoint of, is it part of this or is it in somebody else's scope 1, scope 2?
Dave and company, I'd use ownership as the rationale. So anything owned by UW, the physical assets owned by UW.
Okay, so that's only UWMC campuses then. Okay.
Great, okay. Gabriella, you've got your hand up.
I wanted to bring up that we might want to add a whereas that references the HHS pledge that UW Medicine signed on to. It's in conjunction with it's the Health Sector Climate Pledge in conjunction with the Biden-Harris administration's work. And I can send over a summary of that if that's helpful.
Yeah, that would be great. Yep,
But
I think that would be another good one to add.
Okay, great.
Okay, Tatiana.
Yeah, sorry, I know I'm in the shadow. I have some language recommendations for the second whereas, just in terms of how I think how we can frame it to better focus on Indigenous peoples, and then also instead of vulnerability, maybe doing more towards increased burden. But I can send over maybe an exact recommendation to you in the chat.
Perfect. Yeah, please do that. That would be great. Okay. All right. Any other comments on the whereases, and then we'll get into the be it resolved section and just make sure that we're all on the same page with what we want to accomplish out of this resolution. All right. Final call for whereas comments, changes, additions. Not final, but you know, final
Hey,
for right now.
Lisa,
Yeah.
sorry for joining late. I just want to go on record since I commented previously on some of the language. I like it.
Thanks, Lou. Great. Yep. And I think you had some great suggestions that we incorporated in there too. Okay, Damon, if you could scroll down so that we are looking at the be it resolved. Okay, so I'm going to read through this because again, I want to just make sure that as we're thinking about what we want, the outcomes that we want from this resolution, that that we're getting everything, that we're not missing anything, and or if it's, you know, if people think it's too much. So be it resolved that UW commits to reducing its scope 1 and 2 greenhouse gas emissions by 80% from a 2005 baseline by 2030, and by 95% offsetting any remaining emissions to achieve carbon neutrality by 2035. So just to provide a little bit of context in case it's not clear. So with scope 1 and 2, we're really talking about our building, the fuel that we use for heating and hot water, which is predominantly natural gas, not everywhere. Some of it is electrically heated. Scope 2 is electricity. So that's pretty minimal. That may not be the case for Bothell and or Tacoma. I actually don't know what the fuel mix for electricity looks like from both of those providers. I'd assume it's still relatively clean, but it's going to really be what we're committing to here is so building fuel, fleet fuel, and then refrigerants are typically sort of the biggest sources in that scope 1 and 2 bucket. Okay.
Can Dave maybe comment on the feasibility of 80% by 2030? Considering that we want to and expect to be aggressive in our 5-part implementation strategy for decarbonizing the plant.
And I'll say it's aggressive. It's all hands on deck. It means we need a lot of people lining up and coming together. There literally are going to be thousands of people working on these projects over the next 7 years to get there. You know, it is not going to be easy. It's not you know, but it gives us a target to line everybody up around to have a common goal to hit. You know, put it right there with, you know, Kennedy saying we're going to put someone on the moon in the next decade, and then the organization figuring out how to make that happen.
Yeah.
So I just want to make sure it's this year that we're kind of building that implementation plan.
Yep.
So a year from now, or less than that, maybe 8 or 9 months from now, we'll have a pretty good picture of what is needed and more appreciation for the feasibility of 80% by 2030. But there ought to be a picture in our mind, even today, of what the campus looks like in 2030, what the plant does at 2030, and what projects need to be in place to get us even close.
Yep.
As long as you're kind of thinking right now that it's certainly aggressive and challenging, but it can be done, then I'm good.
Yeah, I think the only piece that's probably got the fuzziness around it is the lake and the ability to get the permits in place in that time frame. The advice we got was if things went as smoothly as possible with the permits, that would take 3 years to get the permits in place prior to starting the work. So that's probably the biggest element, but in terms of the sewer, the cooling tower, the steam to hot water conversion, cooling storage, heating storage, it's a lot to happen concurrently, but it's doable because they're happening in different places of the campus. So it's, yeah, the lake is really the big question mark in terms of 2030.
Yeah, I'm just
So
looking at-
my own handicapping on this, having been around a lot of construction in the city of Seattle, this is on the very aggressive end. And so for me, I ask myself, is it good to make a commitment that's on the very aggressive end? To Dave's point about then will the organization organize behind that principle? Or is there a downside by putting essentially, if the organization is not going to basically rethink everything from procurement to execution to risk to how much disruption we're wanting to take on campus, is it really beneficial to put a aggressive target out there, and we better to put something less aggressive out there, more in line with the state numbers? So I think it kind of goes back to his comment about Kennedy and the space shot. Having put this on there, is the organization willing to basically change its culture, its practices, its risk appetite in order to achieve this? But it's very aggressive.
It's a great question, Brian. I just put out a couple of contexts, right? UBC, from the approval of hot water to the completion of the project, was 6 years. I would say that being involved in it, the first 2 years of that 6 went slower than we would have liked it to, but the last 2 years went really fast because we were now in a sort of a comfort zone of how to deliver. We had lined up procurement, we had lined up project delivery methods. Right?
But you got your deep lake cooling, you got your involvement with King County Metro, you got a lot of partners and stakeholders involved, and Canada's a little quicker at delivering capital projects than Washington State.
Yeah, UW is also bigger than UBC.
Well, but actually our campus is more concentrated. So UBC actually had more miles of pipe in the ground, and UBC did not have a tunnel system. They had to direct bury the entire thing. So in some ways, the UBC project was actually more complex than from a hot water conversion standpoint.
Okay.
I mean, we could argue all day about, about it.
Yeah,
I think the key question is for you, Dave, to Lou, is what Dave pointed out, is this a way to organize and create urgency within the organization? And that's the benefit for me of being aggressive.
Yeah, so I'm totally with you, Brian. That's kind of what's behind my comments previously and my thinking right now. We want to build momentum and get people jumping on, really excited about this. We risk losing momentum if it looks like this is way too pie in the sky. Reason I shared my screen here real quick is Dave.
You're not sharing screen.
Oh, I'm not?
Now you are.
Okay. Well, if everybody can see that, Dave, we need to get all 4 elements of your 5-part strategy done by 2030.
Yep.
In order to get 80%. That top line on greenhouse gas emissions, 1, 2, 3, and 4 adds up to 80%.
Yep.
So, again, are we going to have all of the central cooling, all of the heat pumps, and all of the lines for hot water to steam in place? That's what gets us to 80% just for the plant. There's another 7% of 1 and 2 that's not the plant.
Yeah, look, Lou, I think in the context of these 4 steps, well, number one is almost fully funded. So that's actually a super exciting win. 2 is the big one. That's the big time consumer one from my standpoint. Actually, I think the electrify heating in terms of heat pumps in the power plant and the cooling and heating storage, those are relatively straightforward. It's just more of a sequencing of when you would do those relative to segments of the hot water grid. So I was verbalizing this out loud. honestly, a big pressure point over the next 3 months is to look at our project delivery methods and look at our procurement methods and what we need to do to accelerate that, because or change that or modify that or get people lined up to doing this type of a large program delivery. I think if we did that legwork now, that would give a lot more confidence to the ability to deliver this magnitude of scale by 2030. I think actually those are two of our biggest roadblocks to work through.
Is there a budget attached to all of this? Like, do we know how much all like this is going to cost?
Yeah,
About 800 billion.
yeah. I mean, I think 830 million is what we laid out, but in the context of funding, there's huge programs. There's the Federal Inflation Reduction Act is 2.46 trillion. The state's Climate Commitment Act is a cap and invest program. There's 1.7 billion in the first biennium related to that, and that's at the early prices of that program. So that number goes up. That's where the $18 million that we've gotten to do that first stage has come from, is out of the state funding. So I actually feel really confident in our ability to get that order of magnitude of money. I don't see that as being the barrier. I see the execution of the projects, as Brian's highlighting, as being one of our biggest challenges.
Will self-sustaining units would they be included in that type of grant funding for this? Or, I mean, it's a whole other bucket of interest and strategy there.
The short answer is yes, because one, you're connected to the STEAM system. So you will benefit from the changes that are made from the STEAM system. And secondly, if we're successful with respect to the connections to the lake, bringing cold water and chilling capability to buildings in the athletics precinct that either don't have cooling or have standalone cooling, absolutely will be on the agenda. I know we haven't had any discussions about that, Aaron, but that we're a long way from that. But that absolutely would be on the table related to that. It's just smart to do.
Yeah, I'm just thinking with long-term budget planning, which actually isn't right all that long-term if we're just talking 8 years, right? And just yeah. So that's something I'm incredibly interested in if this plan moves forward with these dates, because we won't be able to afford to do everything that we're going to need to do on our own down here.
Yeah, I just want to say I think this is bold. Let's move forward and keep that as our objective here right now. It's maybe a little bit too early to back off, but I would say I don't think we want to. Honestly, I don't think we launch these resolutions until we know a little bit more about, or until we can say 2030 is feasible. It's hard, but it's feasible. You've got construction execution on a large campus for a lot of work. You've got permitting, and that's assuming the funding's not a problem. Dave, you're optimistic on the funding. I'm less optimistic right now, but we're all in. We're going to make the case and stand on desks to get the funding, but we've got to perform some unnatural acts. We've got to get federal money. We've got to get state money at very high levels. We're going to stand on desks to get it, but until we kind of got some of it going, it's going to be hard to have a lot of confidence on 2030.
Lou, I just want to add to the conversation that if you're not setting bold targets, it's hard to organize the momentum to go after that funding in the aggressive way that you're going to want to anyway. Right. So it's an organizing principle. You're 8 years from now, you're going to get you might incur a bit of shade if you fall slightly short of your targets, but everybody is still going to be cheering.
I'm not worried about that at all. In fact, I think if we get the approval, we go forward, if we make 2032, that would be awesome. What I'm much more worried about is losing credibility early on and not getting the institutional commitment and energy and enthusiasm to do what we need to do to stand on desks. We need our regents standing on desks to make this happen. And if they feel like we're being a little bit too pie in the sky, they're probably not going to step up and jump on those desks.
And I guess my point is, Lou, I think if you're at the Regents, you need to pair the goal with what it will take to achieve it. I don't think you want them to pass the goal because that'll just be a feel-good moment. Sure, we want to pass this. And then later, as you start to miss stuff or it gets hard, you bring back those. I think you have to pair the conversation with, in order to get this, unnatural acts, I like your words there, will have to be performed in order to make this happen. Now, Lisa, sorry, I'm back on the whereas this is more aggressive than the state target. I think you want to think through what happens if a region says, why do you have to be so aggressive? Because none of your whereases set the precedent for why we're needing to outperform the state.
Yeah, I think we've got a good answer for that. And we sort of get to it at some of the top of the whereases, which is if we're looking at the IPCC reports, like if we go back to the science that tells us why. No, I didn't
mean to distract you. I think it's there. But anyway, I would be prepared for that because my head would go there like, well, why do we have to be if the state is already, Jay Inslee, geez, he's all in for climate and we're going past Jay Inslee.
I think that's a good point. And I like the whereases a lot as well. But the one question we might not be answering in the whereases is why UW? I think we have some of that in there, but the state's doing this. We're going above that. We've said it's a dire situation. It's an imperative. It's important, obviously. That's part of the why, but we can't do it alone. So why UW? Why is it important that UW does this? Some of the stuff we have about leadership and being an example for others says some of that, I think. Just want to make sure we answer that question.
I feel really confident that we can answer that from a variety of lenses, that sort of people, planet, profit lens. And I think we've got a lot of the people argument here that there's global impacts. We graduate 18,000 students a year. They're going to go out and be the change makers. They're also going to go out and be the people that have to deal with this crisis. Where we've got the Climate Commitment Act, where we're paying we just paid an extra 4.2, Dave, million, 4.5.
I think your exposure is you're implicitly saying the state's not doing enough.
Exactly.
So I would make sure you're covered with that. I don't object to it. I'm trying to prepare you for.
And I was about to say that. I think the state is not doing enough, and I think their targets are outdated based on the global science. Personally,
yes, Lisa, I'd also, we can add a whereas that takes the fact that the state targets are actually made so that all state agencies reach particular targets as the total of state agencies over time. And the fact that we're the second largest polluter of the state agencies means that we need to make room for others to be able to be right. Like we need to actually to help the state as a whole meet its target for state agencies. We need to act fast so that the other agencies that have a longer ramp up to make their change, like the ferry system in the state of Washington, so that they can have room to maneuver within the confines of the law. So we could fashion something about that. Like it's like being a good, being a good state agency.
Yeah, thanks, Jan. Ben, you had your hand up.
Yeah, to Lou's question about why UW, I think it's worth considering a whereas that acknowledges the president of the university has said we're going to be number one in the world as measured by impact. And the university wants to be number one, doesn't shoot for middle of the road goals. So I think she says it early and often.
That's a great one. Thanks, Ben. Dave?
I actually lost my train of thought, but it was just along the lines of we're talking about 7 years from now, it's 2023, we're talking about 7 years from now, and that's aggressive, and it is, right? It absolutely is aggressive, but we need to move now, not in 2028 or 2029. And so as much as the state's targets talk about, you know, a certain amount by 2030 or a certain amount by 2040, our change is not something we can just, you know, come up with cash in 2028 and make the investment and done, right? The change itself is literally going to take that 6 or 7 years to get there. And so it's just more of the, you know, why we need to act now, and why we need to be more aggressive now than the state, even to in line with what the targets the states put up. Like, for example, in the Climate Commitment Act, the present cost at the auction, right, is, you know, $48 a ton, right? And the state is going to use those auctions by removing the amount of allowances and drive up the price in order to motivate people to make the change, right? Well, we don't want to wait for the price to go up to $100 a ton or $120 a ton before we react, because we can't react that fast. We need to eliminate and no longer be a covered entity by 2030 so that we can avoid having to pay into that program.
Thanks, Dave. Okay, Damon, if you want to scroll down again, I'm not seeing any other hands. If I missed you, just speak up. But I think I want to follow on to what a lot of people were talking about, where I want to make sure that we're all in the mindset of if this is an aggressive target, but we think it's doable, but it is all hands on deck effort. So in the be it resolved sections, I want to make sure that if we need to call out some additional ownership, or, you know, we need you to do this, that we're all thinking in that mindset. Like, this is an opportunity to say, this isn't just a facilities initiative, this is a UW initiative. It is a huge share of our emissions. You know, then there's other pieces that we talked about in scope 1 and 2, but by and large, our heating of our buildings, heating and hot water is the biggest source of our reportable scope 1 and 2 emissions. So, okay, that said, moving on. So I think we've talked about the first be it resolved. Be it further resolved that the university shall prioritize facilities decarbonization plan for the Seattle campus power plant, such that implementation and transition to clean energy can be achieved no later than 2035. That's really just pointing, I think, while it's a little bit redundant of the first one, it's really saying that we want to focus in on that plan. Brian.
So I think this one should be a little more teeth put into this. So I like the fact that you have the reporting mechanism in the back. That works well with boards, is when you have to publicly go back and tell them, are you meeting your commitments? So I like that. So I'm just trying to think, well, okay, now I'm year one, Lou's back at the Regents, and how is he proving he's prioritized decarbonization plan? It's very vague. So I think I would try to play with, get Dave to play with some wording there that would be really hard for Lou not to be able to, you know, if we're not on track, that's really visible. So something like, you know, establish a fully funded carbon plan or something, because prioritize is just too weak. So I'd be happy to kind of think about some wording there, but I think that needs to be tighter.
Okay. Christoph, you got your hand up.
Yeah, following off of that, Brian, I was thinking a similar thing, really just explicitly stating that to further outline our strategy towards decarbonization, you know, we might want to add a further resolve that, you know, the UW Sustainability Office and the Environmental Stewardship Committee, you know, with support from FCUFS, will develop our 5-year sustainability action plan to be, you know, released July 1, 2025 to coordinate these high level, you know, tri-campus targets for scope 1, 2, and 3, you know, with actionable steps to, you know, achieve progress towards our decarbonization goals of 2030, 2035, or something to that effect. You know, maybe we put something in there around the, you know, carbon roadmap, Brian, but I just think being real explicit, and, you know, we know this internally that we have a sustainability action plan. It's kind of mentioned further up in the whereas, but I think it would be useful to sort of as organizing principle just to state that We have that new plan coming out, and that could be the organizational plan to help achieve all these. Aside from, just the decarbonization move with the campus plant, all the other stuff we have to do to decarbonize the campus is going to happen through the Sustainability Action Plan, not through that energy transformation. So I think it would be good to mention it somewhere in the further result.
And Lou, you and Jeff Scott got the board to prioritize deferred maintenance in the long-term capital strategy. How's that working out for you? Not so great, right? So prioritize having the regions prioritize something, it doesn't get you very far. So I think we need to think harder. You missed my earlier statement. Sorry to repeat myself for the rest of you. I think we need some tougher language in there that's going to make it harder for them to slip off properly funding the decarbonization of the plant.
Yeah, getting to your point on tying it to this is what this commitment means. We need to do this. Stand on desks. That needs to be part of this.
Well, I'm wondering if so when we were just in a before this a presentation that Dave was giving for just sort of a general update with CEUO, and we got on the topic of a financing working group and putting that together. And I'm wondering if we have a brand new provost that's starting August 1st, if we want to actually provide some direction to create a finance working group, as part of the teeth to implement and prioritize this decarbonization plan, where the provost is part of that. Any thoughts there?
I wouldn't make such short term. You're not going to get a second bite at the apple of this resolution. So I think you want something, if you're reporting on it annually, that carries you all the way through successful completion of goals. So I think that's a good priority, but I'll think about something you can get that is more like develop and execute a fully funded carbon plan for the plant for adoption by the regions in the 5-year capital plan, something like that. That's very actionable.
Okay.
That then gives Dave and Lou kind of like clear priority with OPB and all to be able to say, hey, the regions directed this.
Yeah, I like that. I like what you just said. Okay. Okay, other comments? Great. Other comments on this one before we move on to the next one? Not seeing any. Okay, so the next one is, be it further resolved that Tacoma and Bothell campuses, as well as all UWMC campuses and facilities, shall create specific decarb plans in order to transition off fossil fuels no later than 2035. Brian.
Thanks, Lisa. Are you going to give them the same out that you gave the commit up above, offsetting any remaining emissions? Because this makes it sound like you can't offset.
Yeah,
I
don't know why this is it's a separate be it resolved, right? Like all UW campuses and assets ought to be under the one set of targets and under the commitment to fully fund.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. I think we had them together and then we separated them largely to shine a light on the fact that decarbonizing the steam plant is orders of magnitude bigger than the other campuses.
Yeah, I don't think you want to do that. If it were the other way around, we could have legitimate questions about separating them. But the fact that you're tackling the biggest one means that you tackle all of the other UW-owned assets in the big one.
Jan, you're suggesting that Tacoma and Bothell are covered under the first, be it resolved?
Yes.
They don't have existing decarbonization plans, though, to my knowledge. I mean, Stanley's doing it and Tony's doing it, but I don't know that they have a formal plan.
Even if they don't have a formal plan, I think Bothell's already way ahead. And so then there could be similar agreements that Tacoma forges to end up having renewables as the basis for its scope 2 energy. So like it's not a tall ask for them, I think. It's just more like how are we going to put them in? It doesn't face any of the timeline hurdles that the Seattle main campus faces. So I don't I don't see the risk in folding them in the main one. And the main one becomes confused and diluted by creating the separate be it resolved for the other UW assets.
Okay. Okay. Do we have, is Martin or, oh, Martin, you're here. Anything to add to that?
I just sent out a quick message, and I'd have to touch bases with Tony, but I agree with Jan, with Jan's point. But again, I could get a little more up to speed than I am now.
Okay. Okay, great. And then what about, I want to make sure we give folks from medicine a chance to comment. Is everyone okay with what Jan's proposing, which is essentially not separating these all out, that everyone should be meeting the same decarbonization target for scope 1 and 2 and creating that decarbonization plan to meet that target? Louise or other folks from medicine?
Yeah, I mean, I agree that calling it out is not optimal. Folding it in is good.
Okay. Okay.
The only other thing I was going to say, Lisa, is by folding it in, yeah, it's kind of the same point somebody made about the state agencies. Like, overall, the UW needs to reduce by 80% and by 95%. That doesn't necessarily mean that UW Medicine and Bothell Tacoma all hit that exact same. If Seattle campus reduces by 100%, that has that little wiggle room for UW Medicine, for example. Like, I don't know exactly how the numbers.
Right.
I think in that whole bucket, that actually, to me, seems like it makes it a little bit easier for the other campuses to, track, because, not everybody's aiming for that target individually. It's that target as a whole.
Right. If smaller campuses can move faster, it helps the more difficult projects, give them a little more wiggle room, I think is what you're saying. Okay. Okay, good suggestions. Okay, next one is, be it further resolved that UW's Environmental Stewardship Committee, in partnership with the Faculty Council on Campus Planning and Stewardship, shall establish a reduction target for scope 3 greenhouse gas emissions by June 1st, 2024. Brian.
Like it, I would, given though that this is going to live on past 2024, I'd put another sentence about and report regularly on the progress to meeting that goal.
Okay. Good one. And just for a little context, we have put this in place because we will not have our greenhouse gas emissions inventory report done until the end of the summer. So we want to make sure that we have a thoughtful, well-informed target. So I think this is a good timeline for scope 3. Okay.
Faculty Council on Campus Planning and Stewardship can agree to that.
Great. All right. All right, next one. So we're on to the top of page 3. Be it further resolved that University Advancement, in partnership with UW's ESC and Board of Deans and Chancellors, shall develop and implement a bold vision, strategy, and fundraising campaign that will enable UW to realize its full potential in addressing the global climate crisis, including organization of the university's fundraising, state relations, and planning, budgeting, and financing capacity in keeping with those priorities.
I have a question for the group about the call out of the different organizations here. I think that we might not have the correct or most most important parts of the university called out here.
Who else are you thinking of, Jan? Can you provide an example?
Well, I'm.
Or you don't know because we don't know what we don't know.
Right. We have an organization that works on, making requests of the legislature. We have and the state and federal funds. We have Brian's group. We have UW facilities. So I want help from folks. We have the reasons itself, which we're talking about a lot, is having to get them motivated. So are we calling out the right organizations here in this be it further resolved statement? It's a question to the group.
Yeah, I think, my first thought here was to ask Brian, how do you like me now? Because we're calling out advancement and we're saying a commitment to 2030 and to all these other things means university advancement needs to do something. I agree with Jan. It's, state relations, it's federal relations, external relations should be added. Maybe this is one paragraph that catches them all, but all of our fund source up and down lifters, it's 4 major fund sources. Donations, that's advancement. State money, that's external relations. Debt, that's Brian and our Treasury Department, but it's really the executive office on leveraging debt capacity to do certain things. And then it's everybody else. It's really central equity and unit equity that could be brought to bear by some means, i.e., God forbid we increase ABB by a percentage so that all units sacrifice some piece of their equity to go into a sustainability fund, tax of all the units equity. These are the kind of things that are going to have to be done tied to a commitment to, embrace 2030.
So I still like you, Lou, don't worry. But I took this as focused on funding a campaign related to this. So I was talking with Maya Tolstoy the other day, and she was waxing eloquent on how much money other private institutions particularly have been able to garner from climate change. This is big with donors. And so I like this as a dedicated bullet point related to developing a campaign. I sure hope you clear it with advancement, but I like it. Separately, to your and Jan's point, I'd be fine with additional resolves that sort of commits the rest of the organization to commit its time and money as appropriate to execute the goals of the plan. So I like that you called out the campaign separately, but I also recognize what you're saying, which is everybody has to be all in on this.
Yeah, I almost think there's a little strategy here to your point, just by calling out one advancement, that's going to go a long way. And no, we haven't, I don't know who's talked to anybody in advancement. We've talked a little bit on the surface months ago, but I think before we include something like this that calls out anybody, especially advancement, we probably need to have a sit down with them.
We'll get that meeting scheduled.
Yeah, I mean, in fairness to them, they've heard of this, they know we're talking about it, but it won't do us any good if anybody gets really surprised and then defensive about things. We need to include them, make this part of their planning as part of the team.
Yeah, I like the idea of breaking it into 2 sections. So one around advancement and a campaign, and then a second around sort of the all hands on deck financing. Okay.
I like that.
And not just financing, but, dedicate resources, time, whatever, in order to make it happen.
Yes.
This is a university-wide effort. It's not just on facilities.
Yep. Okay. And that's where I think, Jan, I like what you're saying about really trying to call out all the different units, organizations that need to be part of that financing group. And it can be this should include, but is not limited to, in case we forget any.
Yeah. And I agree with making it 2 separate be it resolved, because making it clear that we're asking advancement to make this a key facet of the UW capital campaign is, I think its own thing. Gautam Reddy, the current chair of the faculty senate, for him, this is a big deal. Like this is an important thing that he wants to see happen, and he'll be pleased to see it as part of the resolution.
Okay, great.
Yeah, we could use, people like Gotham and others having intentional conversations with advancement and others.
Yeah.
Okay.
The second bullet is like adding more nuts and bolts. Like it is not simply a philanthropic exercise. It is an all hands exercise. So I like that.
And then does anyone have a sense of in previous resolutions, because I feel like this happened in my previous life with government resolutions, but should we call out sort of a leader? Like, should we call out the provost should be in terms of the and maybe the provost is just called out as part of that second bullet on fundraising, but I don't know if anyone has, in your experience being here at UW with resolutions, I feel like it's important to get the provost named in here, but maybe that's just my my own thought, and maybe that's not the way resolutions roll out here.
I wouldn't in this case.
Okay.
But that's just me. Others on the call probably have their own view.
I wouldn't either.
Okay, good. We can put that to
I
bed.
wouldn't either, but there's nothing wrong with saying we have to come together and we have to move it forward, which we've done in the rest of that. So, talking about it as we push the resolution forward, it certainly does have to have a champion at some point beyond just a diffuse champion of sustainability. So all of what you're talking about bringing in the faculty senate, president, and all the pieces, but I don't think you put anyone on the spot at this point.
Okay. Okay, great.
Dan, did you want to say something to that?
Thanks, Anne. Yeah, because the resolution comes, it's coordinated with you all, which is brilliant, important, and big tent of us. But it is a resolution that comes up through the faculty senate to the executive, right? So to Anna Mari's office and the provost. So it is a message that's coming to them. And when they circle back through Treasury and they circle back through facilities, we'll be able to say, hey, we've been part of this, drafting this, we're good with it. And that's what we want. We want that full circle so that, folks in the C-suite can say, okay, all right, we can get behind this.
Dan, could you clarify once the resolution moves up through the faculty senate and goes to the president's office, does it also go to the board of regents?
Yeah,
it goes to both. Okay.
All legislation goes up up there, but just Class C, these resolutions don't have to go to a vote of the faculty, and so it's a swifter passage up through the system.
Okay. Okay, great. Okay, we've got 2 more and 2 minutes, so 1 per minute. Be it further resolved that the ESC shall develop a suite of university administrative policies on sustainability and climate change to help ensure that our organizational goals, priorities, and commitment to implement are clearly established. And so this we've talked about at a couple different meetings. I've brought this forward because I do think it's important that as an organization that we have some solidified administrative policies that cover our different sustainability topic areas like energy, water, waste, et cetera, et cetera. It's something that a lot of other universities have, and it allows us, I think, some organizational stability as presidents and provosts and VPs change. So that's the note there. Any or background there? Any objections, comments on that one? Okay, not seeing any. All right, and then last one, we might actually do this one per minute. Be it further resolved that UW's ESC, in partnership with the Faculty Council on Campus Planning and Stewardship, shall provide an annual progress update to the Board of Regents on the required actions of this resolution. And there's sort of an annual update piece, and we've purposefully made it a joint effort with the ESC and the FCUPs, which I think is good because I think it doesn't put it on any one body or on our small office. It's this joint partnership that spans the entire organization. So that was the thinking there. All right. Well, thanks everybody for a great discussion. Any final questions, comments? All right, we're ending on time. Have a great rest of your afternoon.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lisa. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
That was great.
Thanks.